So, there has been this huge court ruling in Kenya, one that's been years in the making, by the way, and it's completely changing the game on what's considered fair when a marriage ends. We're going to dive deep into this landmark decision and figure out what it means for the very idea of a partnership. I mean, it's a question pretty much everyone has thought about, right? When a marriage is over, who gets what? How do you even begin to divide a life you've built together? It's this massive emotional puzzle, and courts all over the world struggle with it. There's almost never a simple answer. Well, in Kenya, this exact question just fueled a legal battle that's been going on for almost a decade. And the final ruling, which just came down in 2025, is making some serious waves. So let's get into it and see how we got to this point. All right, here's the game plan. First, we'll tackle the main conflict here, this big idea of equality versus equity. Then, we're going to look at the push for a simple 50-50 split. After that, we'll see what the court decided and dig into this really important question: what actually counts as a contribution? And to wrap it all up, we'll look at the final verdict and why it matters so much. Okay, so what's the fairest way to split everything up when a relationship ends? At its core, this entire case really came down to a clash between two totally different ways of thinking about it. You can really boil the whole debate down to this. You've got equality on one side, which basically says, hey, marriage is a 50-50 deal, so the assets should be split 50-50. End of story. But then you have equity, which says, hold on, the split should be based on what each person actually put in. And that could be money, sure, but it could also be taking care of the kids or running the household. But wait, before we even get into how you divide the property, we've got to take a step back. We need to figure out what the law even considers shared property to begin with. And it all comes down to this one key law, the Matrimonial Property Act of 2014. You can think of this as the official rulebook for how property gets divided after divorce in Kenya. So what exactly is on the table to be divided? Well, Section 6 of the Act lays it out pretty clearly. Matrimonial property is the family home, or homes if there are multiple, all the household stuff like furniture and appliances, the whole shebang, and it also includes anything else the couple bought and owned together during the marriage. Okay, so let's dig into the argument for that automatic 50-50 split. The group really pushing for this was the Federation of Women Lawyers in Kenya, which you'll see called FIDA Kenya. And you gotta understand, this was not a quick fight. Not at all. The petition was first filed way back in 2016. It took almost 10 years, plus a really important Supreme Court ruling in a different case in 2023, to finally get to this decision in 2025. Their argument had a few different layers. First, they said that Section 7 of the Act, that's the part that says property is divided based on contribution, was just plain unconstitutional. They argued it went against the idea of spousal equality that's actually in Kenya's constitution. And they made another really powerful point. If all the debts you rack up during a marriage are shared equally, then why on earth shouldn't the assets be too? So their goal was crystal clear. They weren't asking for a little tweak to the law. No, they wanted the court to throw out the whole idea of contribution entirely and just make it a rule. Everything gets split 50-50, no matter what. Okay, so that was the case for equality. Now, let's flip the coin and see how the court actually responded. What was the legal thinking that got them to their final decision? Now, it's important to note the court wasn't just making this up from scratch. They were leaning really heavily on a huge precedent that was set just a couple of years earlier in a landmark Supreme Court case called Ogovedo versus Ogovedo. And in that case, the Supreme Court made a really, really important distinction. They said, look, yes, the Constitution guarantees equality between spouses, but, and this is the key part, that does not automatically mean an even 50% split of the property. They're two different things. So, with that major precedent lighting the way, the court made its call. They sided with the existing law. The ruling was clear. Property division in Kenya has to be based on what each spouse can prove they contributed. So, in the battle of equity versus equality, equity won. Okay, but this obviously brings up a huge question, right? If it's not going to be a simple 50-50 split, and everything depends on proving what you contributed, well, what actually counts as a contribution? And this is what so many people worry about, isn't it? What happens to the partner who maybe wasn't the main breadwinner, the one who stayed home, raised the kids, ran the household, basically making it possible for the other person to go out and earn all that money? Does all that work just count for nothing? Well, the law's answer is a definite no. The Matrimonial Property Act is super clear on this. Contribution is not just about money. It specifically recognizes all kinds of non-monetary work. We're talking about domestic work, childcare, companionship, managing the home, helping with a family business, even farm work. All of it counts. But, and this is a big but, here's the catch. Even though all that non-monetary stuff is recognized by law, you still have to prove it. It all comes down to evidence. You have to be able to show the court what you did and what it was worth, and then the court has to figure out a fair ratio based on that. So let's wrap this up. What's the bottom line here? What does this landmark ruling really mean for anyone who is married or even thinking about getting married in Kenya? Well, the biggest takeaway is this. Getting married in Kenya is not a golden ticket to an automatic 50-50 split if things go south. That idea has been shut down, loud and clear, by the courts. There is a quote from the legal analysis that just sums up the court's thinking perfectly. It basically says that a divorce isn't, a payday. It's not a chance to get a bunch of wealth that you didn't actually help build. At the end of the day, the standard is equity, plain and simple. And all of this leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. The court has made its decision, for sure, but the debate is far from over. Think about it. Is a system where you have to prove every single contribution, money, chores, everything, is that really the fairest way to divide a life that you built together? It's a tough one, and there's definitely no easy answer.